Previously on agentpalmer.com, Breakaway Femmes makes me hope for a 3-week women's Tour de France. Bond and the Beatles have more in common than a theme song and revolvers, and Lucy is getting ready for harvest season on the farm. This is the Palmer Files, episode 157 with Kevin Freitas, who, well, as you'll find out, could be who he says he is, or he could be 17 hobbies in a trench coat. It'll make sense later. We discuss his online, for now, handheld computer museum, music, programming, photography, 3D modeling, and even go back as far as Geocities, perhaps even further. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershic, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 157th episode is Kevin Freitas. Kevin and I connected through the internet at some point, and from that and his website, you'll come to understand, even in passing, that Kevin wears many hats, has many hobbies and interests, and probably has even more that he doesn't know about yet. He's curious, and what he's found he enjoys, he is deeply passionate about. You'll hear us discuss handheld computers because he has an online, for the time being, handheld computer museum. We also discuss music because the man can play any brass from trumpet to sousaphone, and there's also programming, geology, photography, 3D design, and much, much more. All of that is coming your way shortly, but first remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all related ways to contact Kevin and myself in the show notes. To catch up with Kevin and his many goings-on, you can visit kevinfreitas.net, that's KEVINFREITAS.net. And to see the Handheld Museum, it's handheldmuseum.org. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. Kevin, I looked around your website, and it appears to me that you are a man of many, many, many hats.
I would say that's true, yes.
Is there one in particular that is the one, if you had all the time in the world, you would do that one more than any of the others? And I guess at this point we should say, if you haven't been to Kevin's website, it's like you do the handheld museum. You're a musician. It appears you're a photographer of some, and I would assume some technical background as well.
Yes.
So with all, I mean, those are only a few of the many hats. So what would be the one? Like, what would be the go-to? Like, money's no longer an object. You get to wake up and do what you want. What is it?
It's always hard to choose, but I think honestly I would love to open a museum of handheld computers.
Okay, so I
just think it would be a total blast.
So to take the digital that you've made and make that a physical.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's start there.
For sure.
How did the handheld museum start? Like, did you have a collection? Like, where does this begin? Because I mean, I've been trying to think all day, right, about the handhelds I have had. Right. And I'm not. I know phones are included, but I'm trying to think before then. So for me, it was there were maybe 5 early ones, right? Like I had the baseball stadium and the football stadium ones that were like with the dots on the play field.
Yeah, just big LEDs. Yep.
I had the Tiger John Elway football.
Ooh, nice.
I had
with the little preset LCD guys. Yeah.
And I had the oblong shaped green Ninja Turtles one, which I think was
I know that one.
That wasn't Tiger. I think that was Konami. And then I go right to the big brick original Game Boy. Like I think that's the handhelds for me. Of them, if I wanted to follow in your footsteps, the Game Boy's the only one I have left. I don't know what happened to I might actually have the football one still. somewhere.
Okay.
But or maybe it's the baseball one. One of them is somewhere in a box. I mean, that's the thing. It's somewhere in a box. But I don't know what happened to John Elway football. I put hours into that thing, I'm sure. The Turtles one,
Nice.
probably put hours. I wouldn't know where to begin. How did you? Where do you start with this?
Yeah, it started pretty organically. So growing up, same thing, kind of growing up in the 80s, handheld things were becoming a thing, so whether it was these kind of LCD games or LED games, but then the Game Boy kind of busted it open. But so I had a few of those kinds of things growing up, and a couple of them I had them. I still had them, like in college. And around college in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't know if I realized what eBay was, but I was like, oh, I could go look this thing up that I maybe used to have or something like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, I missed it when in the 90s, or I didn't have the money, frankly. I bought an Apple Newton. So Apple's weird 90s pre-Palm, fully handwriting recognition, PDA, handheld. And so I had that for years, and I didn't really do anything with it. Then I got a couple cell phones and things like that. So I had a small bag, like a satchel, with a few handhelds in it. And I was like, these are great, and I can collect them like I've done because it's really cool because they don't take up much space. And then the pandemic hit, fast forward 15 years later or whatever, and it kind of turned into the hobby that I took on. Some people made bread, some people did other things, and I was like, I'm going to just start collecting these things more.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where the bulk of what I have in the collection has come from. And it's, it's really fun to see the devices, but also, I try to clean them up when I can. I try to photograph them when I can, like to give them a new life, essentially, to say like, yeah, these things are part of this fascinating history, which we can totally get into. I think it's worth preserving.
It feels like these things are, I don't know, they're, for lack of a better word, better than the smartphone, right? Like these single-use entities, which, even, and behind me on one of the shelves that no one can see but you, is my favorite mobile phone of all time, which was the original Nokia Razr. Which, because I have my original one, that has been washed 3 times and still worked, at least last time I charged the battery, right? And that's what makes it the best, because it went through the wash and dryer and kept working.
For sure.
But as far as these other single-use things, these games we're talking about, and before we get into the Palms and the iPods and everything beyond that, these single-use games, I just look back and go like, how did I spend hours with this thing? And it's a testament to, it
was a simpler time.
Part of it is a simpler time. Part of it is that we were able to lose ourselves in just an LCD screen as opposed to needing full immersive graphics.
Right.
And you learned the patterns. Let's be real. There were patterns.
Oh, you bet.
And it became something more. And I think that's all I know about it though. Like there's a history to this that is lost on me. Cause like we are of similar vintage, I will say. So like, my parents bought me a computer, or I got a hand-me-down computer in the late 80s when everybody else got an NES. So I never had an NES. Well, you have a computer. That was the argument. Right. So I played NES at other people's houses. My first console is not until college when I bought myself a GameCube. Okay, so there are a lot, and other than that, then the only real console I had was the Game Boy. But those other handhelds, even though they weren't flashy, and I always wanted a Game Gear. Like, I still remember, this is decades later, I still like, well,
there we go.
But I never had a Game Gear. Like, that would have been amazing. Aside from, I had that when I was younger, Did you have a fascination with the technical and the history of it too, or did that come after?
The technical is almost an afterthought for me. Like, I am a technical guy by kind of trade and, by just kind of curiosity. But the thing that I focused in on, even then, even after I bought that Newton, that came to my mind was how really very personal these devices actually are.
Okay.
Whether it's a calculator. So, I mean, my collection goes back to the early 1970s. And I think the interesting thing is every single one of these devices, since they're handheld, which means they're portable, you can take them with you, you can put them anywhere you need them to go. They're extremely personal. And you just alluded to that. You're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I sunk so many hours into this game. There's memories and there's experiences, for better or for worse, that are attached to these devices that have gone with us through thick and thin, and maybe even still like give us delight when we pull them out of a box and they still magically work, which is a thing I'd love to talk about. That's the story to me, and that's kind of the hard part about the museum, but also, and I say museum, my website, that's the hard part, is getting people to kind of talk about the stories, because it isn't about the device. It's about what the device kind of connects you to in your memories or in your family or with your friends. And it sounds cheesy, but that's kind of it.
Well,
there's a fascination with the industry. There's a fascination with, I love failures. Like I love failed devices. But it's really just that. It's the stories, because I think they're very unlike other pieces of technology. I think they're extremely personal. Like even a laptop, I don't think is nearly as personal as as something you slide in your pocket or as something you throw in a bag or something like that.
So I will give you a story then.
Yes.
In couldn't be in ninth grade, maybe entering high school. I was, it's the late 90s. We all had to buy a graphing calculator. Everybody was required to have a graphing calculator.
Yep. TI-85.
Well, here's the thing. So everybody, 6. I had a TI-86, which just meant it was a slightly more powerful, but for what I'm about to tell, for the story I'm about to tell you, that's important. But part of it was, I'm an only child, so I didn't get a hand-me-down. A lot of people I know had 83s or 84s that were from previous older siblings. So mine was going to be new out of the box because, when my parents were in college, they had a calculator, not a graphing calculator. I definitely used the graphics part of my graphing calculator. And so when you talk about those personal stories, and I have it in my desk, I could grab it. I know the drawer it's in right now, and the batteries aren't in it because I didn't want it to corrode and die. And I'm sure the memory's completely shot because it's been off for a very long time. I have to, and here's the other thing, I'd have to remember how to use it.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But I remember some upperclassmen who had a couple same model that were like, well, if you go online and I let you borrow this really expensive cable, you can download some games. Right. Yep. So the first level of Mario, there was a baseball game.
Tetris.
There was
Tetris.
It wasn't Breakout. It was called Asterid, or it was or Aster. It was a Breakout type game.
Breakout clone. Right.
And so these were all things that I spent a lot of time, instead of paying attention in class, doing. However, it is a calculator where you're using it for specific classes and specific maths. And for me, as a person who, by the time I'm, in high school, I've foregone all of my interest in science as it stands, and I've moved to an arts and literature kind of track, which is the way my mind still kind of works. But I know enough to know that I have this powerful tool in my pocket and I'm allowed to use it in tests. So instead of studying before any math test for like 2 years, I would stay up programming the functions in. So it would be like, enter X, enter Y, enter Z. And, if you don't, just programming these things where like, we know how the functions work. We're learning how that's the point of the class, is to learn how to get Y but why should I do any of that when I can just stay up all night programming it and then put in X is this is the rest of the formula, hit enter, and it'll be done, and it'll be done. And so that's what I did. And
absolutely.
The hard part was programming it to show work, because they always wanted you to show your steps. So you couldn't just go into the computer or calculator and program the thing. You had to program it to show you some of the stuff, print along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is maybe the most formidable, like, educational memory I have of high school, is other than staying up late to write a paper. Next in line is staying up late to program this calculator that was mainly for games and occasionally for test taking. Right?
Yeah. And always oblique and a total pain to work with in any way, shape, or form. When you talk about modern UI and stuff like that, you're just like, they're so difficult to get into, and to make them do what you want.
And thankfully, they worked on BASIC, which, even though the late 90s was the internet era, but not the internet era as people know it. So the fact that there was any kind of basic help without a book online for me nobody was going to kick me off the dial-up at 3 a.m. So I had the internet all to myself, and so, but are these the stories you're talking about that you want to collect along with whatever the gaming ones are? But, that's very calculator specific, but
no, but that's the thing is, and I do have a few memories before I left Twitter or something like that. I was able to kind of get a few people to emote and share those memories. And it's just that desire, because I have similar memories. One of my favorites, I have the exact same calculator one where I actually programmed it to be a reference. So I programmed in libraries of information for a test, because we weren't allowed to have like real computers. So I was like, well, I'm allowed to have this. Yep. And so I was able to look up formulas and stuff. It wasn't even like, I didn't even go so far as to plug anything into the formulas. I just needed them as a reference. And I was like, this is great. Yeah. But my earlier one, and this is a weird one, but I kind of love it. When I was in, so it's surrounding the Atari Lynx handheld game. Okay. So this was kind of just post Game Boy, but a little bit pre Game Gear, Sega Game Gear. I saw this thing. I was like, holy crap! It's in color. It's got all these cool games that I had played in the arcade. Arcades were fizzling out by then, but there were still some really decent like nickel arcades and stuff. And I was like, I really want this thing, but I can't afford it. And so what I did was, I had a paper route and whatever. I bought a couple games. I went to Toys R Us, bought a couple games, and basically said, well, I got to do something to get these games to work, which was to actually save my money to get the full Atari Lynx to play it. Yeah. And I did. I totally did. And I still have that Atari Lynx that it's absolutely like in the collection. But it was just it's such a vivid memory that I have. It's more than the games themselves. I mean, except for there's a Batman game that's horrifically bad. But more than the games themselves, I still just remember it. I'm like, how on earth did I think of that as a kid and actually kind of go through with it? And I think there's still a pride there associated with that.
Well, and they're also talisman, and they're like these touchstones to stories, because if we expand it to video games, for myself, between the Game Boy and the GameCube, there are a lot of years, but I have memories going to friends' houses to play the Dreamcast and the Genesis and the SNES and the PlayStation 1. And so for a generation where, especially for us, where there was a before, there was an after, there was the internet, there was cable and MTV, like all of these things, it is just one more thing that we can not only tell stories with, but mark the passage of time with. Like, I remember being in college when the PS2 came out and it being like, well, at least 3 people in my dorm went to midnight sales and came back and were playing games like, at 3 a.m. And so these are touchstones for us.
Yeah. And the timeline, they are. They're touchstones and their timelines. And the timeline itself is fascinating. Like the branching of all these different kinds of devices, and then they're coalescing to a certain degree in the more modern era. But we have, there has been a lot of change in this space over the last, 40, 50 years. And I think it's how it relates to us as individuals, but also of all these kind of industries that we see, swirling around over time. And now there's these gargantuan megacorps and things like that. It's really fun because I think, like I said about the failures, it's fun to not just have those touchstones, but to also see what worked and what didn't, and certain things had so much longevity that it was, like a Game Boy or like a Palm, that it was incredible. But then you see when companies try and frankly just fail. Like, I love that because having worked at, an Amazon, it's a reminder to say that nobody knows what they're doing. So even though you get to the level of $1 trillion companies like Apple and Amazon and all these ones, I'm like, they still don't know what they're doing. They're just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And these devices, to me, are kind of a representation of that, because you can say they fail in lots of ways. Like Google's like, Google Meet, it'll probably be gone in 5 years because whatever, they just recycle through all these products. Those are software products. These are produced, manufactured pieces of hardware and software, and marketing and all these different things that had to come together. And that's a whole heck of a lot bigger of an investment potentially than just a piece of software. I mean, there's a lot more to software too.
But it also
I love seeing that fail.
I like the idea of that because as a like internet nerd / computer geek, Xerox PARC, the biggest failure that there was. I mean, it was a pretty big success, but they didn't do anything with it. So they saw their success through the eyes of what Apple and Microsoft stole from them, basically. But then you look at the Newton, which is just ahead of its time. That's the only problem with the Newton is it's ahead of its time. And then you fast forward to when cell phones are ubiquitous and everybody has one. And I mean, this is going to be very specific to maybe, I don't know if this was global, but you can still hear the Nextel direct talk thing. And that was a feature until, and you thought like, oh, well, at a certain point, like I never had a Nextel, so I never had that function, but you always knew somebody who did. You always heard it when you were out and you were like, well, eventually this will be, everybody will have this. And then Nextel and that feature went completely away. And it's like, in any given space, these things are, maybe they're successful, but maybe they're not. And part of it is we need museums, not just to get back to the website, but like we need museums because some of this stuff you can learn from. I agree. And the other part is because it all happens so fast, depending on what you're doing and where you are, you may not realize that anything happened. Like if you were in, if you went abroad for a very specific semester, you could have missed any number of the things we're talking about because they were so fleeting, or it was just a summer or whatever it is. Yeah. And then without anything else, you could be 20 years down the road at a reunion and 2 people could be like, hey, remember when we used to use that thing? And then a third person go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. And so, these things are,
or like you were saying with video game consoles, you just miss a wave, and you're just like, you turn around and you're like, you're 3 generations down or something like that.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing I think a lot of people in our generation, and maybe 10 years either side. So from ages 30 through 50, depending on when you were in college, you probably saved up your money, your allowance, your lawn mowing, your paper route stuff, and you bought whatever console you could as a junior, sophomore, senior in high school. Then you wait away to college where money's a lot tighter. And, then you get out into the real world where money's even tighter. And then by the time you're established, whether it's with a family or without, with a job and income, you turn around and you go, the console that you last had in high school is three. It's not that hard to go like, wait, what happened? I can't get any more games. There's nothing left. Yeah.
Well, and the collection that I've kind of amassed is surprising in and of itself, because it takes me a lot of time, and admittedly, I have many, many devices that I've not actually cataloged because of the time it takes, and I have a day job and a kiddo. Even in the few devices that I kind of have near where I'm sitting right now that I pulled out, I was like, oh, cool. I'll show these to Jason. These will be really cool. I immediately ran into exactly that thing. I was like, okay, cool. Here's the first iPhone 2G, right? Cool. It's this thing. It feels small now, blah, blah, blah. But then I pulled out the a Zune, a Microsoft MP3 player.
Still have one of those on my shelf behind me.
And I was just double checking the years. I was like, I don't have a photographic memory. So I was like, oh, I'll double check both 2007.
Wait, so seriously?
You're looking. Yeah. This particular model of Zune, this is, not the first one, but probably the second probably somewhere around the second model. So obviously they were still manufacturing, they were still going in on it. And then this iPhone came out, so even right here in my hands, the Zune in one hand and the iPhone in the other, that's a major, nexus point in the world of all these kind of devices. And I just basically happened to pull it out that way today.
Here's the thing. I know 2007 is a long time ago for some people, longer for others, shorter for others. But when you compare, even just the fact that you could get an I guess the all-in-one phone that we know now in our pockets, and a Zune media player only. I think it had,
maybe it did some video.
Yeah, it might. But it's just, and those were both developed in the same year, which is like, if I were to tell you that, it's kind of mind blowing, because if that was a quiz, or if you would have asked me ahead of time, I'd have been like, well, the Zune definitely came out well before the iPhone. They have no cross whatever.
Miles of it, yeah.
But I will say there is something we'll say the word, it will get overused if we go too far with this, but nostalgia doesn't have to be from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Especially as fast as all these things move. I could argue that I have a nostalgia for the original Motorola Droid, because it had the flip out full on keyboard, and as someone who really, it took a while for me to get used to typing on a flat screen. I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. I get an actual keyboard. But that's, and then I go as a crazy nostalgia. There was an Android, a Motorola Android phone. I don't know which one, that I thought was the perfect size. I was like, this is the best. Nothing will ever get better than this. And then they all started getting bigger, and I went, nothing has gotten better than this. I want them to be smaller again. Please.
I know.
Stop making big phones.
Here's the comparison of an iPhone, 16 or 15 Pro Max.
I want to say double. It's not, but
it's half again. It's half again. I mean, easily.
Yeah. And so,
if you want to feel really, really of a certain vintage, I'll say, I just looked it up to double check. The original iPhone will be a voting age on June 29th of this year.
All right.
So
All right.
just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. All right. So, as we started this, a while ago, I said you wore many hats, and the handheld museum was only one of them.
Yes.
But you are also, and I bring this up because it's close to my heart, a musician.
I am.
But you are one of those musicians who plays an instrument I just cannot. I could never play a brass instrument. I have no idea why. I can play a reeded instrument. I can play a guitar, so strings, reeds, and even, percussion. But a brass instrument is somehow, and I tried because I don't know why I tried, but I did. And it's just like, this is just not something I can do. So I want to ask,
Yes.
you not only got into a brass instrument, you appear to still be playing many, many years later. And most of the people I know who play, like, say, trumpet or baritone or whatever, stopped playing in college. So
right.
Did you rediscover it?
Yeah, pretty much. I grew up playing trumpet in school.
Okay.
And so played it through college. And after that, I didn't major in it or anything. I was in a ton of groups in school and I loved it. And I sang. But after college, there wasn't really anything out there for me. And I was in the Tacoma, Washington area. And, it's not a incredibly vibrant, musical community. Seattle, obviously nearby, was more so. But again, that wasn't even my job. I was just doing websites and all that sort of stuff. And at some point, I kind of got a bit of an itch, so I played in a little bit of community theater. I just played in the pit orchestra, and that was really fulfilling, really fun. But again, that was few and far between. And again, that was just really for fun. But once I met my current partner, I met her. She lived in Seattle, and she's like, "Hey, you got to come to this thing," and it's called Honk Fest. And I went to this festival, and it's basically a festival of kind of street brassy, mostly bands from in this area, but also all over the country and world. And went to this thing, and I was standing, a few inches from a guy who had a tuba on his shoulder. And he would get it to his shoulder by like flipping it around a couple times, and then it would land on his shoulder. And we were in a very small bar, way too small for the amount of people in the band. The band was 30 people.
Holy moly!
Mostly brass and percussion. And I was right here, melt my face off, and essentially was like, I got to find a band. So that was 2013, I want to say. So have been in or have started brass bands, street kind of brassy bands since then, and played sousaphone, kind of switched to sousaphone for a bit when the need arose, and fell in love with that. And then currently I'm playing trumpet again in my current band. So yeah, just tons of fun, just for fun, get out there, show my kid what it's like to just do a thing for fun, not have to totally obsess over it.
Or it is nice to have hobby, like an actual hobby, although
sure.
I'm talking to you and I think we could probably go tit for tat on like, well, this is also a hobby and this is also a hobby.
I'm all hobbies.
Yeah, all hobbies
all the way down.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like, oh, is that Kevin, or is that like just like 17 hobbies in a trench coat? That's
pretty much that.
Yeah. So what else makes up Kevin then? Because obviously, you said your day job is programming. Is that?
It is.
And so, there's a lot of steps, but was it always programming? Was that kind of like if I go back to, you and I are playing GameCube or Game Boy. You and I are playing Game Boy way back in the
right.
90s, while we're waiting for our color handhelds to come out. Like, hey, Kevin, what do you want to do? Like, is programming in that? Did you get the bug that early? Because even I, who had an early computer, was not thinking about programming.
No. It was, I had a computer, same thing with you. My parents got like an Apple IIe when I was pretty young, like fourth grade. So that was a pretty big deal. And I poked away at it. Same thing a little bit later, but no, like through high school and stuff, I wasn't programming. I wanted to be an astronaut. Straight up. So definitely like sciencey, spacey, tech, whatever. But no, it was once I was in college that I was coming up when the web was coming up, basically, and started messing around and was like, oh, I can hit this key combination and see the code behind this, web page when I'm on like Netscape Navigator. And so I taught myself. So essentially, I didn't go to school for anything technology. I got a geology degree, and while I was at school, kind of took the knowledge that I'd started to build for doing web related things and started working at that school, and then turned that into doing, working for a web development company, and then a couple of those. And then I was a little stuck. I had a lot of side projects that I loved doing. So I built a lot of my own little kind of web apps and things like that. But then at some point I talked to some former kind of, some friends who were former kind of employees and stuff of a company we worked at, and they worked at Amazon, and they told me about a role that's kind of was for me a revelation. It's called design technologist. And really what it boils down to is you're kind of a jack of all trades, / I like to call it professional generalist.
Okay.
So it really echoed a lot of the things that interested me in my life, which was you're gonna be in this role, and you might be one day prototyping, the next day you might be hacking some code together to see if something's gonna work, and presenting it to leadership and all these different things. So it was a really fun way to take some of the technical things that I knew how to do and turn it into like, oh, I can do this, and I can be kind of diffused in my professional life, similar to how I am personally.
Gotcha.
In my passions and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm still able to do that. I don't consider myself like a enterprise level developer, but I can jump into whatever I want to jump into and make something work, and prove it out or hack it together, and fortunately I can get paid for that, which is great.
So does that make it harder for you when you discover a new hobby and you're like, well, now I got to build a new website, and I can, right? Because and I sit here. Yeah. I sit here as a guy who, I started coding websites when, the badge of honor was I use Notepad. Like I just code it out by hand. And then, switching to WordPress. And then I got out of it for long enough that getting back into WordPress was too hard. And so now I'm like, I think that's my past. And I think I'm on to other things now. But I do know that at the very beginning, when you're trying to learn, if anybody discovers that you do websites, hey, my brother's sister's mom could use a website for whatever, it's like that you are official. Just like never let anyone know you can fix a computer.
Oh yeah.
There are
100%.
And that I fell into that category too, and now I've limited it to family only, but the website stuff at one point I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Like, yeah, I'll do that. And a lot of it is, I think the web was exploding after the year 2000 in a way that our little former Geocities brains never thought possible. Because if I go back, Geocities is my first coding experience.
Yes. Yeah. I still remember my Geocities address.
I can't. This is I know the Wayback Machine did some really good work as far as like archiving a bunch of Geocities stuff. And if I could go back in time, I would just look up what what my address used to be, because I don't remember it.
Ooh,
that's the
interesting.
thing.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to try the Wayback Machine for that one.
Yeah, I don't know what they got. I think they only got certain neighborhoods, quote unquote. But if you remember yours, what was yours?
It was geocities.com/soho/1336.
Okay. And what
I'm on it right now. Well, there are some hits from 1999 or 2000. Let's see. I'm totally checking it out.
So what was it? What is the site, or was the site?
I'm trying to remember what I even put up there at the time. Again, different passions, different desires. I was doing some 3D animation and things like that on my, for no reason, because I wasn't in art classes, I wasn't in media classes. I was just like, I'm gonna make 3D stuff and make little movies and things like that. So I think some of that was it, and some of the site eventually morphed into me saying like, or designing the site in 3D, which was weird. It wasn't. It was just graphics that were made from the 3D program.
Okay.
So some of that probably back then, but yeah, none of the photos or anything at that point in time. That came later. But yeah.
So where did that go? This I'm gonna teach myself to 3D animate. Like, is that I mean, look, we've talked about a lot of things you've rediscovered. You came back to handheld gaming, and you came back to playing blowing some brass. Right. So is this a scoop? Like, is 3D printing, or not even printing, but just 3D design, is that coming back for you?
Via 3D printing a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And so having a basic, very basic, we're talking like the 3D program I use called True Space came on like 2 or 3.5 inch floppy.
Okay.
So there was no, if any, like ray tracing and things like that. Like it was very basic, but it's interesting having at least a little bit of that knowledge, because now that 3D printers are more of a thing, I can confidently kind of build very basic stuff like shapes and things like that. I'm like, oh, I know how to play with this mesh or the spline or something like that to get what I want out of the printer.
Yeah.
So nothing big. One of my best friends, he went on to kind of work in the video game industry and has ever since, doing like 3D design and level design. So I think all of that, I made sure that he was the one to kind of take that off. But I have been flirting with, I'm like, oh man, I should get into the Blender and stuff. I've heard Blender's gotten really good. And yeah, so it never ends. It never ends.
All right. So I have to, before, I don't want to skip over this, but you got a degree in geology, and so far everything we've talked about is an indoor kind of thing. You play outdoors, but I know you said astronaut at one point, but geology is very grounded. Where was this similar to everything else? It was kind of like all along I had a little interest, and so you made the decision, or did this evolve?
It was just a way for me to possibly find a path to become an astronaut, because in the 90s there wasn't really many paths other than you're in the military or you're potentially a scientist.
Okay.
I mean, that was it.
Yeah.
There were no space tourists. There was nothing like that. So for me, it was a mode of like, okay, I could be a mission specialist.
Yeah.
Potentially using something like this. I wasn't too worried about it. And when I got through college, I was like, yeah, I didn't really like some of this nitpicky stuff. I like the big picture, things. So yeah. So getting out in the world, has always been super, super huge to me. And that was the part of geology that I think I liked the most, was seeing, especially the macro, the big stuff out there, whether it's a volcano or whether it's a cool valley that was cut by the, Columbia River being in the Northwest, things like that. That's still cool. And with like my family, we hike a ton. We live in the Northwest. So it's like, I can go down to the water. There's ocean nearby in the Puget Sound. There's whales all over the place. There's mountains an hour away, if not less. And those could be snowy, or those could be, just covered in, giant trees that you can't help but stand in awe at. So, but even in my garden, things like that, I'm like, I love being in the garden and just frankly still hacking things. I'm like, I'll build a thing if I need it, or I'll take all these old fence posts and turn those into something because this is a material. It's a thing I can do something with. So it's been a really fun run and ride, because I think all of it intermeshes. And the thing that I have to think about too, and that I've realized as an adult that I wouldn't have known when I was younger, and I'm fortunate my dad's still with us, realizing that he worked kind of maintenance jobs in like dairies and things like that.
Okay.
And my brother went on to be a mechanical engineer. And I was like, well, I'm not the car guy. I'm not the guy who's gonna, fix things around the house necessarily, or fix the car. But I realized it's all just the different facet of the same thing, which is, making, fixing, DIY, whatever you want to call it. And so even though I wasn't doing those specific kind of mechanical things, it gave me a huge appreciation for what I know my dad did to work really hard as I grew up in these dairies, because he was always fixing shit, and making sure that dairy and that plant, or that one run of, when they're making ice cream or something, didn't fail. So it's really cool to feel that in a lot of what I've done as I've grown up, and then also to try to show that to my kid, just like, yeah, man, just go get it, go do things, like make things, whether they're on a computer, because obviously he has a lot more screens in front of him than we ever had when we were kids, or if it's just outside, we're gonna go do a blacksmithing class on Saturday.
Oh, nice.
This weekend, because I was just like, yeah, you want to make a knife? Let's go make a knife in blacksmithing class. And then, the same day he could be back playing Minecraft. I'm like, that's great. That's all the same. It's all a nacho.
So because I've seen it now, having been on the website, where does the photography come in, and how long has that been going on? Because it feels like,
Yeah,
the technology's been there the whole time. So
yeah, I didn't take a lot of photos when I was a kid with film. I did one trip in college to Hawaii, and I think I borrowed my older sister's camera, like a DSLR, or sorry, an SLR, at the time. And I remember having like 6 rolls of film to deal with, and I like had to go somewhere to try to get them developed while I was there. I think I was worried about bringing them home, so the film would get screwed up in an X-ray machine or something. So I developed them all there. But shortly after, I got my first digital camera, or I used my first digital camera. I remember using one in high school. Like, there's an Apple, and I have one in my collection. It was a really old Apple.
Is that the one with the 3.5 floppy storage?
No, that's a Sony.
Oh,
that's
okay.
The Sony.
Okay.
So the Sony Mavica was the one that in college we had as part of our media lab, and I checked that thing out. Once I discovered it, I checked it out all the time. I basically used it as more than anybody, and I still have all those photos. They were stored on a floppy disk. They were 640 by 480. So, but the thing had like optical zoom, like 10x optical zoom. It was a little juggernaut. The battery lasted forever, and that's kind of where it started. It was I just took pictures, and I think it's the best way I know to remember life. Like, I love seeing them, and I don't think there are very few photos that I would look at unless they're extremely obscure, that I couldn't, again, kind of like I was talking about with handheld computers, I couldn't tell you a story about every single photo, and I probably have more than 500,000 photos. If I haven't counted recently, I used to count. I don't count anymore, and I've just, yeah. And so it's a blast. And now with devices and cloud storage that I can kind of curate around my house, it's really fun for me to share that with my family, and to do these little curations, and to say like, okay, cool, here's the top ones of our family, and those are going to show up on a 16-inch screen that I have on, in our living room, that I hacked together from a Fire TV. So again, another weird project, but I was like, I want this device to fit my needs, and there is nothing like that. And so I would do these kinds of things with my photos, or put them on a website. Before there was image recognition and kind of auto tagging of metadata and stuff like that in photos, on my website, I was already tagging things in my photos. Okay. And the power in that, for me, even though it wasn't every photo I took, I wouldn't put every photo on my website, I was pretty diligent about tagging things, and I could go in interesting situations. Like, unfortunately, sometimes as we grow older, people or friends or acquaintances pass away. And I was literally able to type a name into my own website and pull up, like, I get goosebumps just talking about it, and pull up all these photos that again, since I had kind of been taking digital photos since the late 90s, they were, first of all, instant. And second, people just didn't have photos of things, of these people in certain,
especially
in certain eras.
Not unless you've already spent the money to digitize the physical stuff, right? Because it's not
brutal. Yeah.
I helped my parents do that. My wife just recently did some of that. I still have to do some of that. And it's funny going through it too, because there was a point where you were eligible to get a CD along with the prints.
Right, yeah.
And so there's these things, but at the same time, they're all unlike yours. They're all uncurated. They're numbered. There's no metadata. Maybe there's when it was taken, but sometimes that's lost depending on when the file was created, which is different depending on who's paying attention to what. And so, I mean, everybody take a page from Kevin. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to I mean, we say it, but it is important. If you, and I know that because I've looked and I have at least 3 folders in my main archive that are photos from iPhone, just a dump before I got a new phone, or photos from this Android before I got the new Android. But they're all 17 characters with maybe some kind of semblance of order, but there's only things you don't know what's there. So oh man, to find an actual photo,
right?
I don't think I'd be able to do it.
Well, but again, the technology also changes over time, because the archaic way I was doing it on my website is essentially obsolete. So now it's okay, if it's in a cloud storage, that's great. But now I'm but I need to get back away from cloud storage, because if I violate some terms of service, they could shut me off and I lose
all
2
of your
terabytes
stuff.
worth of, So I'm okay, I got to have a local backup. But then I'm do I look into a local version of tagging and things like that? So it's kind of nonstop, and it is honestly hard to win. It's very hard to win in that regard, but yeah.
It is always a pleasure to talk to people with many interests. Selfishly, it means that myself and my friends are not the enigmas we appear to be. More and more people are engaging in and enjoying more than a few hobbies. And for their sakes, I hope many of them remain hobbies. I definitely want to root on someone like Kevin, who wants to turn his handheld museum from a .org to a street address. But if and when he turns that into more of a job, a fun job, but a job, he'll still have his music and his photography, and I'm sure there's more we didn't get to. In this rush to monetize every small thing, you enjoy something? Time to monetize. It's nice to know that people can have more than one hobby and that they can remain just that, hobbies. Sure, in the current world, money is tight for almost everyone, with rising costs and economic insecurity, but that isn't a reason to double down and turn everything into a job. We need hobbies. We need constructive escape, perhaps now more than ever. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files episode 157. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact us in the show notes. Catch up with Kevin and his many goings-on by visiting kevinfreitas.net, and to see the Handheld Museum, it's just handheldmuseum.org. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heitur. Email and comments can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. right, Kevin, do you have one final question for me?
Yes. I would love to know where your passion for talking with people like me comes from.
I feel like it probably comes from talking with people, like, period. Like, I like to think it was all my own doing, but in all reality, this probably goes back to my parents. I am an only child, and I'm an only child who had parents that were far enough away from other family where I had to not only make my own friends, but I had two working parents, so I would be tagged along to things. And it was something that for a very long time I took for granted. And I genuinely mean that, because I was I guess as soon as you can talk and converse, right? So let's say 5. I was a 5-year-old being tagged along to an event, and it wasn't just, hey, be quiet. It was like, oh, introduce, talk. You can talk to people. You're allowed to. You're not. That's not off limits. But the only other people there are adults, and so I got used to talking to people that weren't my age, or people straight. I guess the other way is to say strangers to me. My parents knew that, but they were strangers to me. And so that became a thing I learned that was rare as far as like cross-generational talk, because, I would talk to, like, in college, I got to know not only the president of my university. It's a small college, but I got to know the president, but I also got to know a bunch of like the vice presidents and the board, because that's not a like a student to power thing. It's just like, that guy's like, look, when you're in college, that guy's 40. He's ancient. Now I am now ancient by those standards, but how many 20-year-olds will just talk to a 40-year-old because it's for fun or whatever? And I was still doing that kind of stuff, to the point now where if you fast forward it, like, my friends of my parents have now become friends of mine. So like, my wife and I will invite my parents' friends over who have become our friends. Like, they could be our parents, but they just come over as our friends, our equals. And it's just a thing where I think my wife is starting to get used to the fact that, like, no, he's got friends that are much older than him, and they're just equally friends. And I think that was part of it. And then the other part was, I'm just a talker. And I enjoy it. I know it sounds, people that have heard this show a lot, and my father specifically who listens, will say like, oh, you jumped on that thing, you didn't let him finish his story. And I was like, but that's the way conversation goes. Like, sometimes there are always threads that are left undone.
Absolutely.
But on a whole, I enjoy hearing your story. And then, usually, even if I tell the same story, something you have said tweaks the way I tell my story, right? So my story's ever evolving. Yeah. And in this medium, I can get away with that. I don't have to edit the story. This is just the next iteration of whatever that was. And so, there's that. I would also have to give some credit to the first podcast I was ever on, which I believe this past spring, I had the 10-year anniversary of the first podcast I ever guested on, which was well before I launched this show. And that was called The Stranger Conversations with Grant Markham. And Grant has since become a friend, but the premise of that show was that Grant would invite strangers on and he would talk to them.
Right.
Or strangers or people he didn't know. They weren't necessarily like, he knew of me at the time, because and I think that a little bit of his, I want to say, like, strength in being able to just talk to a stranger, and having listened to that show and go like, could I do that? And then you launch a show like this, which is conversation based, and without you, this is a very boring conversation, right? Like, so I go like, but I don't want to just talk to my friends, because then you get into inside baseball and inside stories and inside jokes, and it doesn't work. And yes, I have my friends on a lot, but I also have, I think I found you from a social network, and at this point, who knows which one it really was anymore, right? Because 5 years ago, it would have been, well, I either met you on Facebook or Twitter, and now it's like, I don't know, it could be Threads, Mastodon, Blue Sky, and like, who knows? And I think, taking from Grant's Stranger Cons kind of perspective at this point, and so when you take what Grant did with Stranger Conversations, along with the fact that when Twitter went downhill, I was left holding a basket. And what I mean by that is I had if you were active on any social network, you will always find, and you're a podcaster who likes having guests on, you will always find more guests than you could possibly need. But when everybody left Twitter, I was left with a list of just straight Twitter contacts of people who were either no longer on Twitter, had deleted I had all these things that like, oh, I don't need anybody because I've got I always work ahead. So the next 3 months of podcasts are already taken care of. I'll later. And so now I just, if I find you interesting in any capacity, I just invite you on, because I don't want to be stuck with well, Threads died and I'm left with 1,500 that. Twitter still exists, so I can still show people the list of the 200 plus people I would have had on the show had direct messages, all these things. And it's just like, all right. So when you add these things together, it goes, all right, I'm not afraid. And I've had amazing conversations. I've made friends this way. I've reached out to authors whose books I've read that I just talked to. Hey, I read your book, liked it. We had a conversation, and we still text or call each other, every couple of weeks. So it's kind of like all of those things, my parents taking me and learning to talk to people that are older or just a different demographic, which I think helps when I talk to my friends' kids now. And, Grant going after strangers, and then the immediacy of well, if this platform's not around, you probably should ask and try and get an email before, blah, 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 all these things. And so all of that stuff, plus I am a writer, I am a blogger, but if I'm being honest, my favorite form of communication is audio. It's dialogue. And you can do a lot more. Look, I know you can do a lot of things with writing, and you can edit it a lot easier, but you know what? You and I can have a turn of phrase. You and I can insinuate, and we can, have a lot more fun with the language and just have a much better time on a whole talking to each other. So I think that might be why, but I do have a question for you, which is why'd you say yes? This stranger asked you on a podcast and you were like, that seems sure.
I think it's just, to me, it's the dream of the internet. If I want to go just there,
sure.
Because you do think of the early days of the internet, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's these people that are expressing things or doing things that I maybe didn't really understand or couldn't feel like I could reach. Especially early days internet, you're like, you could follow NASA. You could see the photos from a Mars rover come down the day of, that was this taste of connection with passions or things that maybe I didn't have before. And so I think it's that same thing where in the world of Twitter, and I wasn't a super early adopter, but I developed communities that were really important to me, and they were based around usually hobbies or maybe the city, like I mentioned, if I live in Tacoma, there were people there that were really fun to follow and converse with and just see what was going on in their lives. And so I think that's kind of what I love about the internet, and I'll just keep it at internet because it is different. It's whether it's a group text of dads from my kid's school, or whether it's this kind of an interaction where somebody just takes a chance and says, "Hey, you want to talk?"
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I don't think there's anything good to come from people feeling, if not afraid, but feeling intimidated by asking or especially asking. I don't want to mansplain. I don't think people need to just,
Well, that's
be the comment guy or mansplain. But having questions, I think, is extremely valid in our world, and I think that's just it's important.
Yeah, I mean, and if you want any practice at asking, have a podcast that relies on having a guest. Like,
yeah,
you just you get used to no, but you're right. It is kind of this show wouldn't exist without the internet. And I'm not saying that because it's on the internet. I'm saying like without those connections, without happening upon you on a medium of some kind. Like I could have even happened upon your website for no apparent reason, right? But like without the internet, this is impossible because it is that ease of communication, like actual factual, hey, Kevin, do you want to hang out? Like it's that simple. It's not just an echo chamber of people yelling, which is kind of what people assume it is. But on a whole, most of the time it's not. It's pretty peaceful and chill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the access to connect with people. I think some of my favorite moments on like maybe channels I watch on YouTube is like I'll say a small time, movie review channel, and all of a sudden they get to have an interview with, a crew, someone on the crew of a movie. Maybe it's not even the star. They got to talk to the director or the director of photography or something, and that's a huge deal for kind of both of them.
Yeah,
because those crew members or the stunt people or something like that, they don't go on the press junkets. They don't do any of that stuff. But they get to talk shop with people that are really passionate about it and that are making their way. They're making their way on YouTube and doing whatever they are, whether it's a side gig or otherwise. And so I think that's the other thing too, is there are so many people that are involved in so many of the things, like even NASA and things like that I mentioned, that they're happy to talk about their passion or their work or something like that. Great. So that's what the internet is and should always be focused on.